Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today, we are pleased to have as our guest Amy Donaldson, longtime journalist here in Utah, currently working for KSL. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for agreeing. Let's just jump right into it. Let's have you share with our listeners what it was like, where you grew up, where you went to college, maybe participation in youth sports, some background.
Yeah, so I definitely was a youth sports participant. I think the first organized sport I played was softball. I lived in Utah at the time. My mom signed us up for bonnet ball, and my sister and I was terrible. My dad was my coach, and he was not a patient man. He's still not a patient man. And so I learned not to whine at a pretty quickly. But softball that's why it's my favorite sport. I think because I've been playing it most of my life. I ended up playing with my sister the next year, and then my mom was our coach, and we placed in the top few teams and were all-stars, and my mom coached the all-star team. My mom was a really good softball player. And then when I got a little older, I started playing other sports. In high school, some friends went out for volleyball. I grew up in Alaska. I was born in Utah. We moved to Alaska when I was 12 or 13. And so in junior high. And I mostly just played softball until then. And then they had sports available at the school. And so I think for $50, and we were not a family of means. So for $50 a year, you could play that was your fee to play any of the high school sports. So I played basketball. I did everything. I ran cross country. I tried cross country skiing. That was an unmitigated disaster. I love cross country skiing now, but it was a rough go. I did track and field. I was kind of on the bubble of Title IX. So I went to high school in the early 80s, and they were just sort of bringing new sports online. So my sophomore year, I played volleyball and did pretty well. And then I tried soccer. I didn't play that like soccer. I think I played 1 year of kind of organized. It was just sort of, it was fun, but I couldn't even have told you the rules at the time. So I think that for me, going to school was difficult. I have a learning disability. I have dyslexia. And so I didn't love school. And I didn't read until I was in the second grade. And I just thought I was dumb and had some really good teachers along the way. I had a fourth grade teacher who read aloud to us after lunch, and that made me want to read books, but I hated reading them so much. But he interested me in this series of books called The Great Brain, where this kid basically swindled all the adults around him and was smarter than everyone else. And I loved that. So, but he said, you got to learn to read. I'm not going to, we're not going to get through all these books after lunch. So, I had some good teachers along the way, good coaches along the way, but really, I think probably had it not been for athletics, I would have been very underachieving if I graduated at all, because I could work and I wanted to work. And in Alaska, you could find a job, and I think the minimum wage when I was in high school, I don't know who the listeners are, but it was like $3.85 or something. It was, around there, but I got paid $6 an hour to work at a video store. So I felt like I had it made. I could support myself for here and to, forever. And I didn't need an education. And my parents really begged me to reconsider that decision. And I agreed to go to college for 1 year. I didn't decide until June after my graduation. So their options were limited, and my parents had met at Snow College, and they talked me into going down to Snow. And I had family here in Utah, so I came back and pretty much hated it for the first 4 months. Went home for Christmas and was with every intention of staying and not coming back, and missed it. I really missed. I did well in school, in college, and I enjoyed it. And I played intramurals. Everywhere I go, I figure out what league can I join, what sport can I play, and I think it's helped me a lot with adjusting to new situations. And so there isn't really like a season of my life. Even now, I'm like getting into pickleball. I'm a trail runner. I feel like sports are the thing that they're kind of my joy, the thing that I love, and it's how I've kept my mental health in check over the years. But it's also been a very good teacher for me about what I can and cannot do, how much tougher I am than I think I am. I've boxed. I have dabbled in almost every sport there is. Maybe I haven't played cricket. And I almost, I had a friend who wanted me to do rowing. Glad I did not do that. I read Boys in the Boat. That sounds like a brutal sport. I'll stick with softball and and volleyball and pickleball. So, but yeah, it's in a nutshell. It's probably, I'm a lucky person that I met the people I did when I did, because it kept me sort of in the game.
Excellent. Now tell me, where exactly in Alaska? Was it the Anchorage area or down
In Anchorage? Yeah, I went to Robert Service High School. They have a new high school there now, south, in which I would have gone to if I'd lived there. But no, I went to Hanshu Junior High and then Service High School, and in Anchorage.
And so how was it? How was the cultural shock? I call you a second generation Title IXer in the early 80s, going from Alaska and then, Anchorage, which is actually a fairly big city, down to Ephraim in the middle of Utah, which is not a big city.
No, it was unbelievable, the culture shock for me. And my mom is from Heber City. My dad is from Grantsville. So it's not like I was like some big city New York kid, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd never seen a live sheep. And then I go out of my dormitory one day and there's a whole bunch of sheep in the road. And I don't know, do they bite? I have no idea. I know they stink. So I learned about sheep, but and then a couple weeks later, they're doing the turkey slaughter, and I had never smelled any. This is the thing. We're so far from our food. I had never given any thought to that. My dad didn't hunt. We did fish, but I didn't think about how do you get a turkey? Where does it come from? So it was an eye-opening place to live in a farming community. And I found that I really enjoyed it. But at first I called my mom and said, I don't know what you've done to me, why you hate me so much, but you got to get me out of here. Luckily, my parents were broke, because I think my mom missed me as much as I missed her. And if she'd had, I think at the time it was like $600 or $700 for a plane ticket, she would have brought me home and I would have gone. But luckily we didn't have money. Yeah. I was stuck.
Funny story.
I did end up earning a scholarship the next year to be the editor of the Snowdrift, the student newspaper there. Excellent.
So I assume that was your beginnings in journalism.
Yeah. Well, I'd done student newspaper in high school. Interesting. Everyone says, well, why would someone who has a learning disability and hated English classes, why would you get into writing? Well, his name is Mr. Yang, and he was our journalism teacher in Service High School, and he needed bodies. He needed people to participate in newspaper. And I told him I can't spell and I have trouble reading aloud. And he said, good news, you don't have to read aloud. And I'm your editor, I'll fix your spelling. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And he said, there's free pizza on Saturdays when we lay the paper out. So I was a sucker for anything free pizza, free donuts, you name it. Which should have told me I was an innate journalist, because I love free pizza.
There you go.
But yeah, so I started doing that. And what I found is that newspaper writing was a different kind of writing, and it was different enough that, and I wasn't being judged on sort of these, the structure of the following a structure or the grammar. He did fix my mistakes, and I found that just writing improved my writing. And so I always tell people, if you're not good at something, try doing it more. Don't do it less, because you sort of shy away from what you're bad at, right? I can't spell. I'm just not going to be a writer. I'm going to become a mathematician, which, that wasn't in the cards either. But, I think that it taught me writing is really expression of, yourself or of, the people that you're covering. And it allowed me to ask, I was a really curious question. I was a very obedient kid, but also I had like a rebellious heart. So it was a really appropriate way for me to ask questions of adults that I didn't feel comfortable asking in my regular life. So it was a really lucky thing. And I didn't ever intend to be a daily journalist. I had different plans for myself, including owning my own video store. We see what happened with videos, right? So, but yeah, it's been sort of like sports, kind of a thing that I feel comfortable in and sort of innately good at. And so that's, when you're sort of, oh, I think I have ability in this area, you stay there. So, and then, yeah, so then I did the student paper. I was just desperate to get involved in things at Snow College. I joined every club. I joined, yearbook. I don't even remember all the clubs I signed up for. Clearly wasn't a good club member for some of those clubs because I didn't go back to the second meeting, but I met people and I got involved in the school and had great opportunities because it was a small school. And I always recommend it to people, unless you're a person who loves a big crowd and loves 300 people in a class and being anonymous, right? That for me, the ability to ask teachers, to get feedback, to have a really, close personal relationship with the people who are teaching me and the people running the college, really. I mean, I remember going and having long chats with our college president, so it was, for me, the perfect, I don't know that I would have made it in college had I not gone to Snow College.
You mentioned Mr. Yang as one of your mentors. Do you have maybe another mentor you'd like to mention while we're on that subject?
Gosh, so journalism mentors, Vern Anderson also gave me a job when I couldn't spell. The Associated Press, he was the editor of the Associated Press here in Salt Lake. And hold on, I'm going to go can I tell my dogs to be quiet?
Absolutely.
Can you hear them? Okay.
Go ahead.
So Vern Anderson also, gave me an opportunity and was really helpful in, I remember telling him I didn't want to be a daily journalist. And he said, trust me, you're a daily journalist. Because sometimes other people do know your heart better than you know it at the time, especially when you're young. Deanne Evans, who was she was a city editor, first female city editor at I think at either paper, but at the Deseret News, and she was one of my professors. She just gave me confidence to she gave me permission to stop telling everyone I wasn't good at things. Like a lot of time I would say, oh, I'm not good at this, but I'll try it anyway. And she said, how about you just don't say that? How about you just say, I'm going to try this. And then if you're not good, you can, say whatever you want, but you're letting people know up front to be disappointed. And that kind of stuck with me. So, and she was a wonderful mentor. She was just a mentor in that she lived her life in a very authentic way. And for a woman in our profession, it was really, it was a really great thing for me to see right out of the gate. I think my parents are definitely role models and mentors to me, because I consult with them on so much of the things I've done in my life. And so, yeah, I would definitely say them. I had a boss, Chuck Gates, and one of my bosses just recently, Brian West. They are mentors because they are hard on me. And I think sometimes you don't like the people who push you or criticize you. And I'm not saying in an abusive way.
Sure.
The bosses that they see something in you that you don't see. And then eventually you see what it is that you understand their faith in you. And that I'd say that I would give them both credit for that as well.
Excellent. So you graduate from Snow College, and how do you get from Snow College to the Deseret News? Briefly explain that.
Yeah, I wanted to go to SUU, but none of my roommates wanted to go to SUU. Otherwise, I would have gone to Cedar City. I wanted to stay with a smaller school, but they were moving to Salt Lake and they had an apartment, and I could honestly, my rent was $75 a month. So I came to Salt Lake and I applied at the Trib and got turned down. And I got a kind of a part-time / internship at Utah Holiday Magazine. And then I just worked at a glass company pretty much full time, so like 75% to 80% of the time. And then and went to school at the U. And I did not like the U. It was a commuter school. It's much improved recently, in the way things are now with the dormitories after the Olympics. But yeah, I didn't live on campus. I didn't go to games. I didn't get involved in activities. I did the opposite of what I did at Snow. And so I didn't have that emotional connection to the school that I had with Snow. And so I just really wanted to be finished. I wanted to get to graduation and just get out and get a job, do my own thing. So it was actually Deanne Evans who told me I should apply for an internship at the news. And I did, and I got it. And I worked during the first Persian Gulf War, 1991. It was in January. And I basically covered war protests and a few other things, but I also would just go around. We had an amazing staff at the time, the 90s. So glad I worked in the 90s in newspapers. I could go to any of my colleagues, and I worked with some really phenomenal journalists and say, hey, is there something you don't want to do that I could do? School board meeting, city council meeting. And these really great journalists said, yeah, I have a meeting you can go to. But they helped me. I wasn't like just tossed, to do it myself. And they said, these are the issues I'm looking at, and here's some background. And then they helped me write, we co-wrote the stories. And so I had really great, and I just did it, whoever had the time, and then they would sometimes come to me and say, hey, my wife wants to go to dinner tonight. Do you want to go to city council meeting? And I would say, yeah. And this was over and above. And then I went to the AP with Vern, and I was there for about 5 or 6 months. And then the Deseret News offered me a job covering night police and education. And I loved that. It was one of my favorite assignments I've ever had. I was young, unmarried, just working, and one of the most enjoyable jobs and times, just learning every single day. Worked with amazing people in Murray and Jordan school districts and had a great time.
And so you go from the night beat to the sports beat with high school sports. So I want you to reflect.
No,
you went in between.
I went to days. I worked news for 8 years, and then I quit. I quit the paper. I was going to be a stay-at-home mom and write a book. My daughter was born with a congenital heart defect, and I needed insurance because our country has insurance tied to your job for some reason. And that's silly, but that's what my husband's self-employed. So I called my old bosses, and Chuck Gates that I mentioned was in sports. And he was our assignment editor when I was on the news desk. And he said, look, you love sports. Sorry, I should turn my phone up. You love sports. I had done a little bit for him, freelance. And he said, you should give this a try. Let's see if we can combine news and sports and do some unique stuff. And so I could have my old job back also. And I looked at the two things and thought, do something different. I love sports. Let's try it. Right. But I wasn't a lot of sports writers, they grow up sort of just 100% saturated in the sports universe, and they love it more than anything else. I was not that person. And I immediately realized I was a fish out of water. And it was really difficult first year and a half, 2 years. Chuck ended up leaving sports. We cycled through sports editors I think we had 5 bosses in 3.5 years. It was brutal. But that was also about the time of the Olympics, and I was given an Olympic assignment. And so I covered freestyle skiing. And then I just did the same thing with the Olympics that I did with night cups, I just said, I'll do anything. I'll write about Jello pins. I'll cover what are tickets being sold for on the street. I'll do whatever. And they rewarded me by letting me go to the gold medal hockey game. And I got to write a little feature about Wayne Gretzky, which for an Alaskan kid is like a dream come true. And probably the only time I've thought about asking a source for an autograph. I was like, because it's not tempting really, because you're just not a fan anymore. You kind of, it's the profession beats it out of you. But yeah, that was the one time seeing Wayne Gretzky win and Canada win their first gold here. Probably one of the highlights of my career. But it also like kind of helped me figure out my own voice. And Brad Rock, a colleague of mine, he was really instrumental in that because I was really floundering. I had tried covering some jazz, doing jazz sidebars and stuff, didn't love it. And then Chuck sent me to high school softball game and I loved the high school beat. But in sports, high schools are a beginner's job, right? And here I am, and they're like, meh, so I think I just had to get comfortable with the fact that I loved it. It might be where people start their career, but it's where I wanted to spend mine. And so I figured out a way to make it a more meaningful beat for the paper. That's why I started coming to the UHSAA meetings and writing about the issues that were impacting. I looked at the crossover between education and sports and the issues that, high school sports was facing with the rise of club sports and those kinds of things. That allowed the beat to become something that my bosses valued more. Because just going to games was like, who cares about, a 3A soccer game? Well, there wasn't even soccer back then. Who cares about a 3A baseball game?
Sure.
But, I was constantly on the phone with people like you saying, hey, can you look around your school, look around your community? What's bugging you? What are remember when I sent that survey out? Like, what are your top issues?
Sure.
Like, those helped me pitch stories to them and projects to them that they were like, oh, then we'll leave you there. Because the temptation is when you have a reporter who's been trained, like a veteran reporter, you want to move them to a different beat that is more valuable to the paper. And really, with James coming on a couple of years after me, as the prep editor, it became one of the paper's most valuable beats because of the way we valued it. And so we figured out things that made it more valuable to the paper because we wanted to do that. I wanted to cover high school sports. I loved covering girls' high school sports even more than I love boys. So it was, I really do, it kind of drove home to me. Everybody says, well, do what you love, you'll figure it out, right? But what does that mean? Maybe I love ballet and I suck at it. I don't know. But I did find this marriage between this opportunity I had to do sports and the fact that I loved high school athletics and covering those kids and getting to know them. And I could go to any team and find a great story. And so I thought, well, how do we make this, a more valuable beat to the paper? To the point where at one point, and I don't know if it's the same anymore, but back, when we were in the early 2000s, it was Jazz, BYU, and preps were just behind Jazz and BYU for us as far as interest. Nothing registered for us like high school did, except for, obviously the two big brands.
Sure. Well, you spoke about your love for high school sports, so I want you to reflect on what you consider maybe two of your best stories that you wrote over that period of time while you were on the high school beat.
Yeah. So I think, one of them is going to be really recent. And that is, I went down to Hilldale. They didn't have a school for a long time. Then they built
Water Canyon. Sure.
Water Canyon. They built that. And one of the first things they did was figure out what sports can we offer these kids. And I always remember thinking, and I sat through all those meetings and I'm thinking to myself, people are going to understand why you need a school, why you need to have English teachers and math teachers and stuff. But and I will get emotional about it because I was one of these kids, but you have to convince them that it matters that you have athletics. And the kids were so starved for opportunities that when they offered this, one of the sports is wrestling. And at the time, there was no girls wrestling, but all of the wrestlers but one that came out were girls. So here's this community that, fundamentalist LDS community that didn't even have school. Girls were married off at, 12, 13, 14 years old. So they like, I don't think we understand how much your world shrinks. Think about when you were 18 years old, what you thought was possible in your life. It was probably much smaller than what was actually possible.
Oh, sure.
And it didn't, and until you went to college or you got out on your own or you went on a mission or you did whatever it is you did in your life, you took a gap year trip, whatever it was. And all of a sudden the world, you see how massive it is and how much bigger the opportunity is. And so what happened is these girls get this opportunity to wrestle and they're going to schools and communities they've never been to, and they're meeting girls from and boys from other schools. And all of a sudden, what they thought was possible for themselves is exploded. It's increased exponentially. And it just absolutely in my gut made me realize like why I loved that beat so much, because it took kids from wherever they were, whether they were in a Sandy City, Utah, to play at Monument Valley, or they took the Monument Valley kids to Sandy City, Utah. I'll never forget when the kids, I think it was Wayne, beat Jordan in basketball. Mm-hmm. I don't know, do you remember that? Yeah, it was 1A versus 5A. Yes. Nobody believed it. I saw that with Rich High School beating Skyline High School in volleyball. It was a huge thing, right? And I just saw the kids, their hearts and minds were just blooming with like, wait, if I can do this, why can't I go to BYU? Why can't I? I remember when a young woman from Wayne won a scholarship to BYU, which was the first kid, from a 1A school to earn, I think it was a basketball scholarship at a D1 school. And I just remember thinking like, this is just going to be not even a story at some point. There'll be so many of these kids because they'll start, and I didn't have any idea about club and what club would do and, travel teams, mm-hmm. But I could see that just getting on a bus and going somewhere and seeing what was possible, meeting these other people, seeing what was in their lives was just completely changing the game. And so I love that story, even though I think it was 2018. But I loved it because we take so much for granted. This community didn't have a school. They didn't have sports. They didn't even know how to be sports fans. They didn't know when they come and buy a ticket, what are they supposed to do? How do you cheer? Why is there a snack bar? So many little things that we just like, it's part of the experience. And I go to games and I'm like, where's the hot dogs? Where's the popcorn? And what, why are they not having halftime entertainment or music or whatever, I just think that we underestimate how much these are and if we learn anything from the pandemic year, I hope we learned this, that these are a lifeline to kids in so many ways that we can never, put into words, even though that's what I'm supposed to do. I would say there are a lot of stories. There was a catcher from Juab High School who was in a car accident and she was paralyzed. And I spent a few months with her family and her community as she kind of tried to figure out, she had a scholarship to go play softball. Now she's paralyzed. Nothing she loved more than baseball and softball. And the name of it was Catching Hope, because the thing I got from that experience was whatever life deals you, we don't have hard things or difficult things or setbacks in our lives because, God's trying to make us tougher. Like, that's what we all think. Like, God's the ultimate bad coach, right? Like, he's the guy saying, you need to go run sprints and then you'll appreciate this practice. Everything that comes to us really is a gift. It is might be a shift in perspective. It might be a path that you couldn't see that you need to go down, right? And so it's given to you in love. And no story helped me realize that more than Sam Guillory story from Juab High School, where I just looked at this and thought, why would you want to live? Everything you love is gone. You can't have it. Now, what brings you joy? And for me, if you told me, Amy, you can never play sports again, I don't even know what I would do. And it's not because I'm good at it, Mark. It's because I love the cooperative, I love, like, let's strategize, let's do this.
Sure.
I love all the stuff that goes with it, right? But I loved covering Swing for Life over the years. We both know Kathy Howa.
Sure.
That's probably been one of my favorite stories to be associated with. And I think of all the coaches and kids and moms and grandmothers that I've written about in association with those things. But one year, my daughter, every year on the anniversary of she had open heart surgery on April 24th, the year I came back in 2000. And one year, all the girls were going to take, I told Kathy, I can't come they were sleeping over in the gym. It was nothing a sane person would want to do, sleep on a gym floor. But I was going to take my daughter, who I think Daphne at the time was like 8 or 9 years old, and we were going to stay there. And I said, well, we can't come because we go to primaries every year and we take toys to celebrate the anniversary of her open heart surgery. And Kathy just decided on her own to make that part of Swing for Life. They don't do it anymore, but so all these teams collected toys, and I'll never get over seeing, I don't know, it felt like 1 billion girls, but it was like 100 girls from all these different schools that I had never met. They don't know my kid. And then I remember Bingham, my daughter was in love with the Bingham girls. They braided her hair and did all kinds of stuff. And she rode on the bus with them and they carried her in on her shoulders. And the whole thing, I just thought, what a great thing for these kids. Yeah, they're here to play softball, but look at all the stuff that they're experiencing that has nothing to do with the softball field, right? And everything I did, every town I went to, one of my, Tom Morton and I, we still talk about it, and we both sit and cry like we're having breakfast somewhere or whatever, about the year Bryce Valley won a championship after the coach's son was killed. And they had his nickname was Big Red, and they rolled up his jersey and they tapped each other out with that jersey. So when you left the game or came in, you traded that jersey off. And so he was with them, right? And one of the best games I've ever seen, just from a basketball perspective. So exciting, being 3-pointer to send it into overtime, 3-pointer to win. It was just the most incredible game. But then that aspect of it, right? This community sort of coming together and having this moment out of, because when you live in a smaller community, and even when you don't, in a school community, one kid getting sick, one kid having a mom that you have really involved, like, it's just like, it just, the ripples go out, right? And it was just, I have to say, I went to Swing for Life again this year. It's much smaller. I think some of the schools did their own thing, COVID, everything. But I just got in my car afterwards and cried and thought, I feel so lucky that this is what I've spent my life doing. You have to work to make money, but I feel like every time I go out and do one of these things, I get more than I give. And it's just the greatest experience, and I miss it.
Well, thanks so much for giving us that perspective.
Much longer answer.
No, that's great. I want you to talk quickly about now your transition from going from the Deseret News to KSL. I realize it's the same parent company, but you're going from a print person now to a voice person, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember, but I did a high school sports. In fact, I was talking to Rick Bullion about this. So for 9 years, we did the Prep Fan.
Right.
This is a show that he just came up with. And I was a sub, and it was Valentine's Day. James did the show with him. And it was just barely starting. And he said, oh, it's Valentine's Day, it's Ladies' Day, because 2 of the people we interviewed were women. And And, he just had the foresight, I guess, to say, I think we should cover the girls the same way, which is really, outside of James, I hadn't met any men in this business who said, who feel that way. Have I met some principals and ADs here and there? But the vast majority,
Right.
they know what the draw is, and that's where they put their time and energy. But that was never the point to them. The point was, these girls play just as hard. They're just as good as stories. We should do the same thing. And so he brought me and got me involved in that. And so I did radio for 9 years. I got a lot of great feedback. I learned a lot. Some of the best advice I got was from Gordon Monson from the Tribune, who said, people can go anywhere for sports information. Because print reporters like to keep distance between themselves and a story, and a broadcaster really can't. They're part of the action, right? And he would say, people can go anywhere for sports information. Why should they come to you? Right? They don't feel a connection to you, it won't matter. And that was really good advice to get for radio. I had never even taken a broadcast class. And then in 2016, a colleague of mine, we decided to start a political podcast that would encourage people to talk to people who disagree with them in a civil way. And I had no idea how, crazy things were going to get in 2016, but they did.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a lot of fun. And again, I didn't worry about being good at it because I was having fun doing it. And I thought, if KSL will let me do it. And then we created our own company and started making some other kinds of podcasts. We have a veterans podcast, and I did an outdoor podcast for a while. And I love audio storytelling. It's still writing. There's still writing involved. But I love this. I love podcasts. I love that I can put in my earbuds and go for a run or a walk or a hike, and somebody's talking to me right in my ear. And I hear the anger in their voice, or the emotion in their voice, or the sadness, or whatever. And I love that. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do after print journalism. I have been thinking about leaving. I went back to news, and it's just not the same, newsroom as when I was there before. And so I was kind of struggling with what I should do. And then this opportunity came up, and I had a couple of ideas, and they loved the ideas. So now we're going to see if I can make podcasts for a couple of years. I don't know. I still would love to do something prep oriented. I know there's some people who are trying to do that, to tell stories. I'd love to see if we could do what we did in print in audio form. That would be my goal.
Excellent. We're just about out of time, so I want to finish with a couple of questions. One goes back that I ask every athletic director who's on our podcast. You, having spent 20 years as a beat writer, if you had 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator, from your point of view, that they had to have to be successful, what would those 2 things be?
Well, number one, I would say, know your kids. Know what your kids need. Know what will make this experience is not about the best athlete. This is about the kids who need sports more than sports needs them. The kids who need sport, the kids who are good at sports, they're going to be fine. The kids that you need to worry about are the kids who don't know that they're athletes. They don't know that there's anything to be gained by participating in a sport. That's my number one thing for any high school athletic administrator. The other thing I would say is find a way to tell those stories, because the one thing I've learned is in sharing those stories, I've inspired other kids to get involved in ways that they didn't see as a possibility. Everybody doesn't see themselves as the high school quarterback. That's fine. But everybody could maybe be on the cross country team, or they could be involved in some way. And if you get those kids involved in athletics in your school, you will make your school community stronger, but you'll also make those kids stronger. They will be more connected. They will be more confident. They will have more fun. They will know how to find joy in their lives. And they will also be really resilient in ways that you can't be if you don't have, if you're not involved in athletics in some way.
Great answer. Thanks for sharing. Let me finish with this question, Amy. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
why didn't I become a lawyer? No, I don't know. You know,
That's
I hope, the only thing I will say, I'll end with this. I hope to someday be back involved with high school athletics. I hope we find a way to hold on to what is, to the best parts of it. So much focus on, competition and winning and the elite athletes and developing athletes. I think we always have to remember, why did we create high school athletics, the high school athletic leagues? So that kids can participate. The goal is to get as many kids as possible in participating in athletics and activities as possible. Every kid in your school should be connected in some way to an athletic endeavor or an activity, whether that's band or track or whatever. Find what they love, find what they can do, find what they need. Because I'll never forget, when a football coach had a kid who was not eligible, and he went to that kid's house and he said, you can't play, you're not eligible, but you need to come out and go through practices and be our manager, be involved in some way. And the kid said, why would I do that? And he said, because football doesn't need you, you need football. And to me, that's the heart of high school sports. These kids need athletics for so many other reasons than what 90% of what we focus on. We focus on who's good, who's winning, who's getting scholarships, blah, 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 blah. What the lasting impact is people like me, people like my husband, who become what they do in life because some coach let them participate on a team. And they loved it so much that they realized they were tougher than they thought they were, they're stronger than they thought they were, and they're smarter than they thought they were.
excellent answer about about interscholastic athletics, which we're involved in, as opposed to the college models or professional. So thank you for that wisdom.
Yep.
Thank you, Amy, for being our host today on the podcast. For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week as we present another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye, Mark.